He sneered in a child's face, convinced no black woman could ever serve in the nation's elite ranks. The girl froze, humiliated, until the sliding doors opened and her mother walked in, uniform gleaming under the store lights. Janelle Carter wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. She was 13, standing in the sneaker section of Academy Sports inside Northlake Mall in Charlotte, joking with her cousin about classes, basketball, and how badly she wanted the newest pair of Jordans. She spoke casually, without even realizing her words carried weight. "My mom's not picking me up yet. She's still finishing up at Fort Liberty," Janelle said, snapping a shoebox lid back into place. "She's in special operations, so her schedule's all over the place." Her cousin Malik blinked in surprise. "Wait, you mean your mom's actually in the military? Like, for real? Fighting and all that?" "Yeah," Janelle replied, as if she were talking about what she ate for breakfast. "Her name's Master Sergeant Dana Carter. She just came back from deployment last month." Before we go any further, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if the story moves you, drop your thoughts in the comments and share it with a friend. Now, let's begin. It was the kind of thing kids sometimes mention in passing, not realizing how big it sounds to others. But before Malik could even respond, a sharp laugh cut through the air. Not the light laugh of someone amused. It was harsh, mocking, the kind that strips you down. A few feet away, browsing through a rack of Under Armour jackets, stood Officer Bradley Knox. He was off duty, wearing jeans and a Charlotte Hornets cap, his badge clipped to his belt like an accessory. He looked more like a casual shopper than a cop. But the laugh was his. And it was loud enough to turn heads. "Special Forces?" Knox shook his head, grinning. "Come on, kid. I've worked in law enforcement over 2 decades, and I can tell you right now, there's no way your mom is running around with special ops. Especially not," his eyes narrowed, his voice dipping with weight. "Especially not someone like her." The word stung like a slap. Janelle's cheeks flushed crimson, her throat tightening as strangers turned to listen. A mother pushing a stroller paused by the sock display, pretending to browse. 2 teenage boys by the checkout smirked, whispering behind their hands. Malik leaned close and whispered, "Just ignore him. He doesn't know anything." But Knox wasn't done. "Kids love to make stuff up," he chuckled. "My son used to say his dad was Batman. Same kind of thing, cute, but not real." The heat of shame rose up Janelle's neck. She wanted to defend her mom, but the words stuck like stones in her throat. Her hands trembled as she slid the shoebox back onto the shelf with a scrape that felt louder than everything else in the store. "Why'd you say that out loud?" Malik whispered nervously. "Because it's true," Janelle whispered back, her voice small but defiant. That defiance earned another mocking laugh from Knox. "See? That's exactly what I'm talking about," he said loudly enough for the small crowd to hear. "Sweet kid making up stories. Nothing wrong with it, but let's not pretend fairy tales are facts." Fairy tales. The word dug into Janelle like glass. Her mom wasn't a fairy tale. She was real. Flesh and blood. A woman who tucked her in at night one week and was halfway across the globe the next. A soldier who carried scars and medals in equal measure. But under the fluorescent lights of the sporting goods store, with Officer Knox's smirk slicing at her truth, Janelle couldn't prove it. And he knew it. "Tell you what," Knox said, tapping the badge clip to his belt. "If your mom's really special ops, maybe she ought to swing by the precinct. We could all use a good laugh." Janelle's chest burned. She thought of her mom's strong hands, the shadow box of ribbons hanging in their living room, the way Dana Carter carried herself like no one could knock her down. And here was a man tearing it all apart in front of strangers. Her voice cracked when she finally managed to say, "You don't know anything about her." The words lingered in the air, trembling but undeniable. Knox smirked, shaking his head as though he'd just been challenged by a toddler. Sweetheart, I know people. I've worked with special forces guys before, big, tough men. They don't exactly look like your mom. Trust me. The condescension dripped from his voice like oil. Every word was designed to cut. Janelle's jaw tightened. She wanted to scream that her mom was tougher than half the men he was talking about. That Dana Carter had pulled soldiers out of burning vehicles, had trained in deserts where the heat could kill a person in hours, had stared death in the face more times than Knox ever would. But the laughter around her told her the crowd wasn't on her side. The mom with the stroller exchanged glances with another woman, eyebrows raised as if to say, "Is this girl serious?" The two teenage boys near the checkout chuckled openly now, nudging each other and mouthing the words, "Special Ops," like it was the punchline to a joke. Janelle's throat ached. She was standing in the middle of the store, shrinking, her sneakers suddenly too heavy for her feet. She wanted to disappear. Malik stepped up beside her, his shoulders squared though his voice was low. "Man, you don't even know her mom. Why you gotta embarrass her like that?" Knox's smile faded for just a second, replaced by that sharp-edged cop sometimes carried when challenged. His hand shifted to rest on his belt, not his gun, but close enough to remind everyone it was there. "Watch your tone, son," he warned. "I'm not embarrassing anybody. I'm just keeping it real. You can't walk around making wild claims and expect grown folks not to call you on it." Janelle's vision blurred with angry tears. She blinked fast, refusing to let them fall. She thought of her mom again, the photo on their fridge of Dana in camouflage, crouched beside her squad, dust swirling around them. The patch on her sleeve didn't lie. The uniform didn't lie. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered. Because her proof wasn't here. Only Knox's smirk was. Then, almost mercifully, a sound cut through the tension, the heavy squeak of automatic sliding doors opening at the front of the store. Janelle's head snapped up. Her heart skipped. And then she saw her. Master Sergeant Dana Carter strode into the Academy Sports with the kind of presence that shifted the air in the room. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, her uniform crisp, boots polished enough to catch the lights. On her chest gleamed a name tape, her unit patch, and ribbons that spoke louder than anything Janelle could have said. The chatter in the store dimmed instantly. Heads turned. The two teenage boys stopped laughing. The mom with the stroller froze in place, eyes widening. Knox's smirk faltered. Dana's gaze scanned the room, sharp, alert, the gaze of someone trained to assess a space before even breathing. And then her eyes landed on her daughter. "Janelle," she called, her voice steady, carrying authority without effort. Relief flooded Janelle's chest so hard it almost knocked her off balance. Knox, trying to recover, chuckled nervously. "Well, looks like Halloween came early." But no one laughed with him this time. Because Dana Carter was no costume. She was the real thing. The air inside Academy Sports shifted like someone had thrown open a window. Silence pressed heavy as Master Sergeant Dana Carter walked closer, her boots striking the tiled floor with crisp precision. Every step announced something unshakable: discipline, authority, power earned through years of blood and grit. Janelle's chest swelled with relief. For the first time that day, she didn't feel small. Dana reached her daughter and rested a steady hand on her shoulder, her eyes sharp as they flicked toward Knox. "Is there a problem here?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. It was the kind of voice that made even strangers stand straighter. Knox coughed, forcing a laugh. "No problem at all, ma'am. Just a misunderstanding. Your daughter here was making some, pretty big claims." Dana's eyebrows arched slightly, though the rest of her face stayed composed. "Claims?" "Yeah," Knox said, shifting his weight. "She was telling folks her mom's in special forces. You can see how that might sound, far-fetched. Malik opened his mouth, but Dana's subtle hand raised stopped him. She didn't need anyone to fight her battles. She took one measured step closer to Knox. Now they stood only a few feet apart, an off-duty cop with a fading smirk, and a decorated soldier whose silence alone carried more weight than his badge. "And why exactly," Dana asked coolly, "would that sound far-fetched?" Knox's jaw worked. He glanced at the gathering crowd, suddenly aware that more people had drifted over. Employees lingered behind the checkout counter, pretending to fold shirts but watching intently. He shrugged, forcing another smile. "Look, I've been around. I know what special ops looks like. Usually, it's, tough guys. Combat-hardened men. It's not exactly," he gestured vaguely, "what people picture when they think of a black woman." Dana cut in, her tone flat as steel. The question landed like a brick. Knox froze, caught in the trap of his own words. The crowd stirred uneasily. Dana's eyes never left his. Calm. Unblinking. The kind of stare that dismantled excuses. Janelle clutched her mother's sleeve, trembling, not from fear anymore, but from the electric charge of vindication. Knox licked his lips, his voice fumbling. I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did," Dana said evenly. The silence after her words stretched long and heavy. Then, with practiced precision, Dana reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew her military ID, holding it up without breaking eye contact. The laminate caught the store's fluorescent lights, her name and rank gleaming undeniable. "Master Sergeant Dana Carter," she said. "U.S. Army Special Operations Command. And if you'd like, officer," she let the word hang with subtle weight, "I can call your precinct right now and explain how you've been mocking a child for telling the truth about her own mother." Gasps rippled through the small crowd. The two teenage boys who had been snickering earlier muttered under their breath, their eyes wide. The mom with the stroller shook her head slowly, her gaze fixed on Knox. His face flushed red. His smirk was gone. His badge suddenly looked small compared to hers. Janelle stood taller, the tears in her eyes now burning with pride. For the first time all day, Knox had no comeback. For a man who had spent years flashing a badge to command respect, Knox suddenly looked like he wanted to disappear into the nearest rack of sweatpants. His jaw opened, then shut again. No clever remark came out this time. The crowd wasn't with him anymore, they were with her. With the woman in uniform whose very presence made his arrogance shrivel. Dana slid her ID back into her pocket, her movements precise, practiced. Then she crossed her arms, her voice level but razor-sharp. "You thought humiliating my daughter was funny? You thought making her feel small in front of strangers proved something?" Knox cleared his throat, struggling to muster authority. "Look, I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I was just, joking around." Janelle's eyes widened. Joking? That was his excuse. Dana tilted her head slightly, studying him the way a seasoned soldier studies terrain before battle. "You mocked a 13-year-old girl," she said. "You told her she was making up stories about her own mother. And then you tried to laugh it off when you realized you were wrong." Knox shifted his cap, his face burning red. "I didn't mean any harm." Dana's voice dropped lower, more dangerous for its restraint. "Harm isn't just bruises and broken bones, officer. Harm is teaching kids that their truth doesn't matter. Harm is making them question their worth because of who they are, or because of who their mother is." The words landed heavy. You could feel it in the silence, in the way even the air seemed to wait for his answer. Knox opened his mouth, but nothing came. Behind him, one of the store employees finally stepped forward. A young manager in a polo shirt, clearly emboldened by Dana's authority, spoke up. "Sir, maybe you should leave." The shift in the room was undeniable. A few minutes ago, Knox had been the loudest voice in the building. Now he was cornered, exposed, his authority stripped bare. His eyes darted between Dana, the crowd, and the manager. He muttered under his breath, "This is ridiculous." But when he turned back toward Dana, her eyes were still locked on him, steady, unwavering, like she was holding him accountable not just as a soldier, but as a mother. And Knox looked away first. Janelle felt her chest swell, tears pressing at the corners of her eyes again. But this time, they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of pride. Her mom hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't needed to. The truth alone had been enough to dismantle every ounce of Knox's doubt. And for the first time since the whole ordeal began, Janelle stood taller, her shoulders squaring just like her mother's. Because today, the world had been reminded that strength didn't look one way. And her mom had just proven it in front of everyone. Knox's hands balled into fists at his sides, not from courage but from embarrassment. Every second in that store felt like a spotlight shining on him, burning away the false confidence he'd worn so easily just minutes ago. Dana didn't move closer. She didn't need to. Her voice carried enough weight to hold the entire room. "You wear a badge," she said evenly. "That badge is supposed to stand for protection. For service. For honor. Yet you used it like a shield to mock a child. To belittle her truth. To laugh at her pride." Her words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Each one cut sharper than any yell could. "You think strength only looks like one thing? You think sacrifice only belongs to one face, one gender, one color?" She shook her head slowly. "Then you've already disrespected not just me, but every man and woman who's ever served this country." A hush blanketed the store. No one shifted. No one spoke. Even the registers at the front seemed to quiet, the beeping scanners pausing mid-checkout. Knox swallowed hard. His earlier smirk was gone, replaced by the stiff, brittle posture of a man cornered with no exit. Finally, he muttered, I didn't mean to disrespect." Dana's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Intent matters less than impact. Remember that." And then, with military precision, she turned to her daughter. Her expression softened instantly as she looked at Janelle. "You never need to prove who I am," Dana said gently. "Not to him. Not to anyone. You know the truth, and that's enough." Janelle's throat tightened as tears welled. She nodded quickly, unable to find words. Malik stood beside her, wide-eyed, his respect for Aunt Dana radiating like heat. Dana straightened, her gaze sweeping over the onlookers. "Let this be clear," she said, her voice steady. "Strength doesn't come with a mold. And if you think you know what it looks like, you've already underestimated it." The crowd absorbed her words like scripture. Even the two boys who had been laughing earlier shifted uncomfortably, guilt etched across their faces. Dana rested a protective arm around Janelle's shoulders. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's go." As they walked toward the exit, people moved aside instinctively, parting like water before them. Some nodded respectfully. Others simply watched in stunned silence. And Knox? He stayed rooted where he stood, face flushed, jaw tight, staring down at the floor like a man stripped bare. When the sliding doors whooshed shut behind Dana and her daughter, the spell broke. But the lesson lingered in the air like smoke after fire. Because everyone who'd been there knew one truth now. Strength didn't ask for permission to be believed. By the time Dana and Janelle reached the parking lot, the adrenaline still buzzed in the girl's chest. She gripped her mom's arm tightly, her voice shaky but full of awe. "You didn't even yell at him. You just stood there. And he couldn't do anything." Dana unlocked the car and smiled faintly, though her eyes were still sharp with lingering fire. "Real strength isn't about being the loudest in the room, Janelle. It's about standing firm in the truth, even when someone tries to tear it down." Janelle swallowed hard. "But he embarrassed me in front of everybody." Dana cupped her daughter's chin, tilting her face up gently. And you held your ground, she said. That's what matters. Don't ever let anyone convince you your truth is too small to be believed. Malik climbed into the back seat, still buzzing. Aunt Dana, you were like, straight out of a movie. That guy looked like he wanted to crawl under the floor. Dana chuckled softly. Life isn't a movie, Malik. But sometimes people need a reminder that the world is bigger than their assumptions. What Dana didn't know was that the reminder had already started spreading. Inside the store, after she left, the silence slowly gave way to murmurs. Customers whispered about what they'd just witnessed. A young cashier pulled out her phone, her hands trembling as she typed furiously into a note app before the memory faded. By the next morning, word of the confrontation had already found its way onto social media. A post on Charlotte's local community page read: Yesterday at Northlake Mall, a police officer mocked a teenage girl for saying her mom was in special forces. Turns out, her mom walked in wearing the uniform, Master Sergeant, decorated, every bit the real deal. She put him in his place without raising her voice. Absolutely powerful moment. The post spread like wildfire. Within hours, photos of Dana Carter in uniform, pulled from public ceremonies and official releases, were circulating alongside the story. Hashtags like #StrengthHasNoFace and #Master Sergeant Carter began trending in Charlotte. For Janelle, logging onto her phone that evening felt like stepping into another world. Her classmates had seen it. Kid she barely talked to sent messages, "That was your mom? She's a legend. I'll never forget this story." But what struck Janelle most wasn't the attention, it was the way people talked about her mother with the respect she had always known she deserved. And as the story gained traction, it became clear, this wasn't just about a cop in a store. This was about every little girl who'd ever been told her truth was too unbelievable. Every child who'd been laughed at for saying their mom or dad was something extraordinary. Dana Carter had become the living proof. Officer Bradley Knox thought the incident at Academy Sports would vanish as quickly as it started. A moment of embarrassment, nothing more. He figured by the next shift, it would be buried under the daily grind of routine patrols and paperwork. But by Monday morning, his name was already being whispered in the precinct halls. A lieutenant slid a printed copy of the viral Facebook post across his desk. "You want to explain this?" Knox's face went pale. The post had thousands of shares. And worse, comments. "This is who's patrolling our neighborhoods. Mocking a 13-year-old black girl for telling the truth about her mom. Disgraceful. Fire him. Imagine belittling a child whose mom has risked her life for this country. Shameful." Knox stammered. It's exaggerated. People are twisting it online." But the lieutenant's eyes were cold. "Were you mocking a child in a store?" I didn't mean it like that." "That's not what I asked, officer." The silence was damning. Word of the confrontation had already reached Fort Liberty as well. Soldiers who served alongside Dana Carter weren't about to let her reputation be questioned. Within hours, statements of support flooded Twitter and Facebook. "Master Sergeant Carter is the definition of strength. If she walked into a room, you knew things were under control. I'd follow her into battle any day." The fact some cop laughed at her daughter's pride? Sickening. By the afternoon, local news stations had picked up the story. Headlines splashed across the screen. Viral confrontation, police officer mocked teen for claiming mom was special forces, then she walked in. Dana, meanwhile, had no interest in the spotlight. She brushed off reporters who called her home, politely declining interviews. "I serve my country, not cameras," she told them. But even without her voice, the message spread louder than ever. At school, Janelle felt the shift instantly. Kids who had snickered at her last week now looked at her with wide-eyed respect. Teachers nodded at her in the hallway, some even offering quiet words like, "You must be so proud of your mom." And Janelle was. More than ever. As for Knox, the storm only grew. The chief ordered an internal review, citing concerns of conduct unbecoming of an officer. Protesters gathered outside the precinct holding signs, "Protect, don't mock. Respect all who serve." It was clear, what had begun as a cruel laugh in a sporting goods store had grown into something Knox could no longer control. And for the first time in his career, the badge on his belt didn't make him feel powerful. It made him feel small. Officer Knox sat alone in his patrol car, engine humming, lights off. The radio crackled faintly, but he couldn't focus. His phone buzzed non-stop with messages, friends, colleagues, even strangers sending screenshots of articles, tweets, and videos. He scrolled through one headline that made his stomach twist. "Hero soldier, humiliated daughter, how a cop's mockery sparked outrage." The article had his name in it. His full name. No hiding anymore. Knox tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and dragged his hands over his face. He thought about calling his wife, but what could he say? That the story was being blown out of proportion? That he didn't mean it? But even in his own mind, the excuses sounded weak. At home, meanwhile, Janelle sat cross-legged on her bed, her phone glowing as notifications poured in. Malik sprawled beside her, still buzzing with the electricity of everything that had happened. "Look," he said, holding up his phone. "People are making edits of your mom, like, putting her quotes over pictures of her in uniform. She's going viral, Janelle." But Janelle wasn't smiling. She scrolled past the memes, the hashtags, the endless praise. Her heart still carried the sting of that moment in the store, the laughter, the humiliation, the way her chest had burned as strangers stared. Dana knocked lightly on the door before stepping in. She set her beret on the desk and sat on the edge of the bed. "Everything okay, baby girl?" Janelle hesitated. "Why'd he laugh at me, Mom? Why'd he act like I was lying?" Dana exhaled slowly. She reached for her daughter's hands, her grip warm, grounding. "Because some people can't see past their own limits," she said gently. "When they look at you, or me, they don't see possibility. They see what they've been taught to believe. And when your truth doesn't fit in their box, they laugh. Because laughter feels safer than admitting they're wrong." Janelle's throat tightened. But it hurt. Dana pulled her into an embrace, holding her close. "I know it did," she whispered. "And I can't promise it won't happen again. But listen to me, Janelle, your voice is strong. Stronger than his laughter. Stronger than anyone's doubt. Don't you ever let someone else's small vision shrink the truth of who you are." Tears pricked Janelle's eyes as she nodded against her mother's shoulder. Malik, unusually quiet, finally spoke. "Aunt Dana. I've never seen anything like that before. The way you shut him down. You didn't even yell." Dana smiled softly. "The loudest person in the room isn't always the strongest. Remember that." And in that room, with her mother's arms around her and Malik's wide-eyed admiration beside her, Janelle felt the lesson sink deeper than any headline or hashtag ever could. Because this wasn't about going viral. It was about dignity. About truth. About knowing that sometimes strength wasn't in proving yourself to the world, but in refusing to bow when the world tried to deny you. The courtroom grew tense as Samantha's lawyer called the hotel's regional director of operations to the stand. He looked uncomfortable, shuffling papers nervously. "Sir," the lawyer began, "were you aware that your staff denied service to Mr. Johnson, despite him being the legal owner of the hotel?" The director hesitated, then admitted, "Yes. I was informed afterward. But I didn't intervene because I assumed it was just a misunderstanding." The crowd gasped. The judge leaned forward. "So, you allowed a man to be denied entry into his own property because you trusted your staff's prejudice?" The director swallowed hard. I didn't think it would escalate this far." The lawyer's voice sharpened. "And when Mr. Johnson showed proof of ownership, what did you advise the staff to do?" The director looked down. To stall. Until I could verify through corporate. That was the breaking point. The jury's faces hardened. The judge shook his head in disapproval. Samantha glanced at Charles, her once steely confidence starting to crack. She could see it, the tide was turning. The lawyer seized the moment. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this was never a misunderstanding. It was systemic arrogance, fueled by prejudice, upheld by management. My client was not only humiliated, he was deliberately dismissed, even while presenting the truth. The jury nodded. The atmosphere was electric. But then Charles, desperate, slammed his hands on the table. This is absurd. He's just playing the victim card. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge slammed his gavel. One more outburst, Mr. Charles, and I'll hold you in contempt. Samantha closed her eyes, realizing Charles had just sabotaged their case even further. The once proud manager now looked like a cornered man. And as Charles sat back down, beads of sweat dripping, everyone in the courtroom knew, his downfall was only moments away. The courtroom was silent, so quiet you could hear the shuffle of the judge's robe as he leaned forward. The jury filed back in after hours of deliberation, their faces unreadable. Everyone held their breath. The foreperson stood. In the case of Johnson versus Regal Grand Hotel, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Johnson. Gasps filled the room. Charles's jaw dropped. Samantha froze in her seat, eyes wide in disbelief. The foreperson continued, we award damages in the amount of $5 million for emotional distress, loss of reputation, and discriminatory treatment. The courtroom erupted, reporters scribbling furiously, whispers racing through the gallery. Charles shot up, red-faced. This is ridiculous. He set us up, he wanted this all along. The judge slammed his gavel. Order. Sit down, Mr. Charles. But Johnson didn't even flinch. He stood tall, calm, his voice steady as he turned to the room. I didn't ask to be disrespected. I didn't ask to be humiliated. But when you tried to strip me of dignity, you forgot one thing, truth always wins. This hotel is mine, and no amount of arrogance or prejudice will change that. His words echoed. The jury nodded. Even the judge gave a subtle look of respect. Charles sank back into his chair, his face pale. Samantha, usually sharp-tongued, had nothing left to say. Their empire of arrogance had crumbled in a single verdict. As Johnson walked out of the courtroom, reporters swarmed him. He paused, looked at the cameras, and said one last thing that would replay on every news channel that night. Never judge a man by the color of his skin or the clothes on his back. Because the man you dismiss today, may be the one who owns the ground you're standing on. Flashes erupted, applause broke out from the gallery, and Johnson strode into the sunlight, victorious. Behind him, Charles sat broken, his career and reputation shattered forever. The humiliation he had tried to inflict on another man had circled back, and destroyed him. Life has a way of putting us in moments we don't expect, moments that test whether we'll stay quiet or speak up, whether we'll shrink or stand tall. If this story resonated with you, let it be a reminder. Always defend the truth, no matter who tries to silence it. And if you want to hear more stories like this, make sure to subscribe.